Hey there, this is Kellen in Vancouver, British Columbia. It's January 1st, 2021, and in our video today, I'm jumping back in time to August where I made my very first harvest ale. See, what I did a few years ago was I bought a first year hop vine from a local nursery, and I've been caring for it over the last few years. And so here we are, the year where I felt comfortable doing a harvest, making a beer, and seeing what we got. So like I said, it's a Chinook hop that I've been growing. I have an IPA recipe that I'm going to be making the beer with, and you'll see that in the video. Now at the end of our video, I still got a couple bottles of it kicking around, even though it's 4 months later, so we'll do some sampling. And you know what? For me, I did a few things right that I'll definitely repeat at this next year's harvest, but I also made a bunch of mistakes. So I hope that you get to learn from the mistakes that I made. But let's watch the video, and then at the end, like I said, we'll go over a few points and see what we ended up with after all that work of harvesting our Chinook hop. Okay, let's go. And it's the end of August, and it's exciting because I have my third year Chinook hop that I'm going to be able to harvest and make a harvest ale. Now it's exciting because it is my first year that I'm going to be taking the hop cones off and actually using them in a beer. You can see here that it's actually had a pretty good 4 months. It's had a fair bit of sun. The hop cones, I can see them growing up top, are pretty big. They're looking good. I've been checking to see that the oil content is ready, and right now it's kind of that dark yellow color, so it tells me that it's time to harvest them. Now you can see that I have sort of a hop gallows kind of trellis that I made here. It hasn't worked very good. Next year I'm going to do something different, but it did keep everything supported. So for today, what we're going to focus on is I have an IPA recipe. I'm going to use a bittering addition of maybe some citrus, some pearl, something like that, just to make sure it has a backbone. And then all these wet hops off the Chinook, I'm going to put into the whirlpool. So we'll have to see how many I get off of this, because like I said, I've never done this before, but I am hoping to get a few pounds and to be able to work with them. Okay, so I've got my work clothes on because if you've ever worked with hops before, you might know that the little burrs on the bines can cause irritation in the skin. It can actually give you a pretty bad rash. So I've got a long sleeve shirt on, I've got some gloves and tape, and I'm going to be putting all that on before I get to work on the vine here. Up here is the top of the vine, so it would have been in more full sun than obviously the area down here. So the hops are the biggest here. So if you come in close, look at the size of some of these Chinook hops. I mean, about 2 inches, 2.5 inches. I mean, in comparison to maybe some of the smaller ones on the vine, I mean, these are monsters. So if you have a good weight, nice papery feel to them. They smell very pungent, so I'm looking forward to weighing it all out and throwing these in the beer. I have a double IPA recipe, and I was hoping to retain a little bit of the sweetness since I have so much grain. I don't want to necessarily dry this thing right out to a bone, even though I want those hop character to shine through. So I'm on maybe 156 to 158 degrees Fahrenheit. That's kind of what I'm going to shoot for this harvest ale. And as far as my grist, it's your standard IPA recipe with majority 2-row, but I've added a few other things. I added a little bit of white wheat malt, added some Munich and some honey malt, but not in large quantities, a few ounces here and there. It's a recipe I got off a friend. So I'm just stirring up my mash. And I'm going to, as I'm kind of working with the hop vine here, I'm going to be sort of coming back and stirring it in and checking the temperature about every 15 minutes in my 60 or 90 minute mash here. Okay, so we've been busy picking our hops, and it's chaos, but we're getting a lot out of, well, we're getting a big yield this year. So I think we're already over 5.5 pounds, 6 pounds, and we've got more to go. But at the same time, I've been getting my harvest IPA ready. So we've done the mash. We did about 70-80 minute mash schedule. Brought it up to a boil now, and it's just hit boil. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a bittering addition of pellet hops. So I'm doing this because, first of all, we don't know what the real bitterness level is. We don't know the alpha acid content of these Chinook hops. And also I've heard that a long boil with them can draw out more of the unwanted characteristics, you know, more of the vegetal, the chlorophyll, things like that. So what we'll do is I got a, if you can see here, I've got about 2.5 ounces of Citra, as well as an ounce of Pearl. These are just what I had in my freezer. So here we go. I'm going to add my bittering addition here to boil for a good 60 minutes. A nice thing. Dump that in. Now I can start my timer at 60 minutes. Let that bittering addition get started. That's it. And look what we got out of this harvest here. 2 and about 1/3 full buckets of hops. I had no idea I was going to yield this much Chinook hops off of one plant. You know, so I think we're estimating about, I would say 8 pounds, but let's measure it out here. So I'll get my scale going. All right, just change it so it shows pounds. There we go. So let's start with this guy. Right. There we go. Wow, look at that. So far, just that bucket showing up at just under 4.5 pounds. And I don't even have enough to fit the rest in. So 4.5 pounds there. And here's what I'll do to kind of get the rest of it. I'll tear that. Okay. 4.5 plus 3 pounds, 11 ounces. So 7, just over 8 pounds. That's a pretty good. Right here, I've still got my bittering addition going. So now I'm going to add 1 pound of wet hops. Okay, so this is the start of it all. 1 pound works out to almost a half a bucket. You know, pretty amazing. So here we go. All right, 1 pound is in. So we're going to boil that for 10 minutes. And look at that. As the air boils out of it, it starts to kind of bubble up. Let's see if we can get the water in contact. Okay, so we're going to boil that for 10 minutes, and then we're going to shut the flame off and see how much we can get in there as a whirlpool addition. So I'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, so we're just coming up at the end of our 60-minute boil. So now we can shut off the heat. Turn off the tank here too, just in case I bump it here. Okay, so now we've got 1 pound of wet hops in there. We still got our bittering addition hops in. So I'm just going to quickly take out as much as I can, because I want to make sure I've got as much room as possible to fit in every bit of wet hops that I can squeeze into this kettle. Hindsight, putting in wet hops into the boil was a bad idea. I had read online that guys were using hop bags for this, and I see now that it just, trying to use a colander, the colander just gets bound up with hop matter way too quickly. It's taken me forever to strain out this wet hop material. We fished out as many of the wet hops as we could from the 10-minute boil edition, and now I filled my brew in the bag with as many hops as I think I can get into this kettle. So we still have one full bucket left, so I estimate this is probably about 3.5 pounds, 4 pounds. So let's add it and see what we can make happen here. Since I'm adding it in such a big quantity and I'm adding it into the bag, I'm not going to be able to whirlpool like I was hoping I could. But instead, I'm just going to be steeping these hops in the bag. I'm just pushing them down into the wort now. Okay, here, I'll come around this side so you can see. So actually, it's not too bad. They're sinking in, and I can add more hops for sure. I've still got a few inches of headspace. Now, I lost a fair bit of beer in fair bit of wort when I had to scoop out that 10-minute edition, and I estimate that when I pull this bag out that's completely full of this wet hop, it's going to take with it a fair bit of water. So I think I'm only going to end up with, I started off with 6.5 gallons of wort. I think I'm going to end up with probably 4.5 gallons. But I think we're around 168. So that's okay. That's not too bad of a steeping temperature. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that. I think that that's probably enough wet hop to add. And then yeah, we'll let that sit for 10 minutes. I'll pull it out and let it drain, and then we'll rack over to our carboy and go from there. Okay, so we've been steeping our hops now for 10 minutes, so check that out. You can see I've got a lot of headspace still in the kettle, but I measured out the hops, and there is 3.5 pounds of hops left over, meaning there's 4.5 pounds that we've used. So I've got 1 pound at the 10-minute edition in the boil, and then 3.5 pounds put directly into the steep. Sorry. Here we go. Oh. Okay, here's my chiller. And we're gonna do a little Indiana Jones swapperoo here. Okay. Now my kettle's probably only half full at this point, so I'm probably down to 4 gallons of wort. So let's hook this up and let it start to do its job, right? And that's it. Once that's done, we'll transfer and get going. So, just gonna transfer that over now. Right. So here's the beer, fermenting away just fine with 2 packs of US-05. Pretty vigorous fermentation. So then we go right back to the start of it all with our vine. Here's what we started with. And after the beer, here's what was left over to dry and store in the freezer. Okay, so there you go. We harvested all the hops. We made the beer, fermented it away just fine using US-05, and now we can do a bit of a sampling. So here I'll show, we'll crack our bottle here. I've been slowly giving some of these bottles away as presents and obviously drinking them over the last summer. Nice, refreshing IPA recipe. So just before we taste it, here's a couple of notes. So, yeah, I'm calling this my Harvest Moon Chinook Harvest Ale. It came in at about 6% alcohol, and I'll give you just a quick rundown of the grain in it. So 12 pounds pale malt, 1 pound of carapils, half a pound of Munich, and 5 ounce Crystal 20, 5 ounce honey malt, 5 ounce white wheat malt. So that's, I didn't put any sugar in it. That's the grist bill. You know, again, this was a recipe given to me by a friend, and I modified it a little bit as well. In the video, just to reiterate, that was a 1 ounce addition of Pearl at 8% alpha for a 60-minute boil. I put in also just over 2 ounces of Citra at 10% alpha acid, again for 60 minutes in the boil, just to give it that bitterness backbone. It was a whole pound of Chinook at 10 minutes, fresh. And then we put in 56 ounces of fresh Chinook hops right at the steep there. We didn't really do a whirlpool, right? So we just kind of steeped it for a good 10 minutes at the end. I fermented everything out with USO 5. 2 packages, just so I wanted to have hopefully enough cells to kind of get the job done. And I did do a 2 ounce dry hop with fresh dried Chinook. Some of the Chinook hops that I took off of that vine, I ended up drying and putting in the freezer. So I put 2 ounces into the dry hop for a week before I bottled this beer. Now I did put in a bit of calcium chloride and gypsum, about a teaspoon of each. Honestly, I wasn't doing any water calculations. We have very soft water here up in Vancouver, British Columbia. But I will say, since since doing this video, and I have started getting into my water chemistry more, I just made a basically a triple IPA. I put in the water additions, and as it turns out, I feel it does show up in the finished product as being just that much better of an IPA. So when I do this again, I'll definitely do my water calculations and add the right amount of what I need to add to our water. Okay, so let's give it a taste. So it holds on to its head pretty well, as you can see here, nice and clear. That's really what I was looking for. I didn't necessarily want a hazy beer, so I got a nice clear IPA, holds on to its head. Yeah, it's got a really nice smell. It's not oranges and tropical. You're not getting a lot of that. It's just a more of a subtle aroma. Definitely a little bit more of the spicy notes. Yeah. Oh, there's nothing wrong with that. I'll give you the OG and the FG. It's a 10. Let me see here. 1052 original gravity, and I ended up at 1006 as my final gravity. So it did dry out. So actually I'm feeling all that bitterness coat the back of my tongue, as you will with a dried out IPA, right? So honestly, it's very good. I'm glad I put as much of the bittering additions into it as I did with pellet hops, so that the fresh hops could lend more of their character without needing to rely on them for the bitterness. It's interesting IPA, especially since I'm comparing it to the one that I just made that was a lot of Citra. This has a way more of a sort of Pilsner type of feel, if that makes any sense. It's the spicy hop. The grist shines through more than maybe it would otherwise in a really hoppy IPA. And you know what? I didn't put a ton of caramel into this grist. What did I say again? It was a pound of carapils and 5 ounces of Crystal 20, a little, a half a pound of Munich. There wasn't a lot of caramel quality there. So again, the hops are shining in this beer. Honestly, very refreshing. At 6%, it's got just the right balance of alcohol, in my opinion. Yeah, very good. I'm not much of a beer connoisseur when it comes to the tasting notes, but I know what I like, and I like that. Now, things that I would do a little bit differently, like I already talked about, the water additions I think will add something to the final product. I personally think that even though I am getting the bitterness on the tongue, at the back, it's lingering, I like that. And it is refreshing. It does have a Pilsner-like quality to it, so you can tell on a nice hot day, this would be maybe the first thing you'd reach for. I'd still like more something in the hop. So I think personally, I mean, you saw how much fresh hop went into that beer. I think that the quality, the hop quality that is brought out really is shining, but maybe a little bit stiffer for me personally, a stiffer backbone of bitterness. So I put in the ounce of pearl, and I put in just over 2 ounces Citra at 60. I think what I'll do this next time is go with something like a Saaz hop, again, emphasizing that Pilsner spicy hop quality, but go with a big addition. Maybe give myself some serious IBUs. Now I put in the Chinook fresh hops just into Beersmith. I put in all those fresh hops at 1% alpha acid, just to kind of give myself some kind of indication of what the bitterness might turn out like. So this is clocking in at 101 IBU. I mean, it's totally not scientific. Who knows? Maybe I'm sure it's more than 1%, but I mean, hey, what do I know? So what I would like to do, though, regardless of the IBU on here, put a little bit more hops into it, some pellet hops at the beginning, and then basically go through exactly what I did with the wet hop additions. I think what I'll do differently, though, is, I did the 10-minute addition, boiled the pound of the wet hops, and then I added everything into the whirlpool for 10 minutes only. I think adding a 10-minute addition again would be fine. Maybe doing 2 pounds, let's say, of wet hops. And then when I can add a lot more of the wet hop in at the end and let it steep for a while. Let it steep for maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Because I noticed, and you don't see this in the video, but I noticed when I pulled out that hop egg and I was just looking inside, I could see some lupulin, some of that yellow hop oil still in and on the cones. It wasn't, even though I was stirring, there's just so much hop material that it wasn't getting extracted, all of it, into the beer. So I think maybe a longer steep time, and and just beat the crap out of it. I don't with a spoon or something while it's steeping. I don't have a recirc pump or anything that's going to be turning the water over. I'm relying on a brew in a bag setup. So that's what I'm going to do. But you know what? For all the work of raising a hop plant, fertilizing, water, the watering every day, and looking for aphids. And I was fortunate in my year here that ladybugs just came out of nowhere and set up shop and bred, and they just took care of me so much. It was really exciting to watch those initial black little creeper crawlers that are the ladybug, the initial stage, kind of take over. And if you don't know, maybe it'll freak you out if you don't know what an early stage ladybug looks like. It's not a pest. It's doing its job. Then they set up shop and they took over, and I didn't have any real pest issues. I didn't have to worry about anything. So I'm fortunate in that way. But the point of what I'm saying is, for all the effort, for everything that you're putting into growing a plant, all of the work associated with it, then the harvest itself, it took us hours, my wife and I, to pick all the hops, and it's a whole day's investment. It's worth it because, you'll never get to do this experience. I don't know anywhere where I can go buy, whenever I want, a nice harvest ale. And then you get to put it in your pantry or whatever, you store it, and then here I am, I'm in January, and I get to crack open a beer, and every time I do, I'm reminded of this Chinook hop harvest that I got to enjoy doing. So if it's the kind of thing you're into, I say go for it. That's about it, you know. Learn from the mistakes that I made. Don't put hops into your kettle if you can't fish them out again, because you would think you could just get that colander in there and scoop out the, yeah, no, you can't, because they sink and it becomes a complete pea soup mess. So put them in a bag if you're brewing a bag setup like me, and you know, you're using in such quantities that even if you're worried about extraction, just use more and don't worry about it. Relax and have a homebrew, right? So anyway, guys, cheers. Hope you enjoyed the video, and maybe I'll post one in another couple of years once I've maybe perfected my process a bit more and end up with really dialing in the perfect harvest ale. So cheers to y'all and all your efforts to make a nice harvest ale.